night she came back, we all heard her voice before we saw her. That voice, it didn't belong to anyone alive. It happened when I was a boy in my village, Arochukwu, in Nigeria. We were warned not to speak of the Warrior Queen. She was said to have been dead for over a century, but her spirit still wandered, angry and restless. They called her Obioma, and she had once ruled with power that frightened even the gods. But she was betrayed by her own people. Some said she cursed the land, promising to return when the blood of her enemies called to her. I didn't believe it until that night. It was late, and I was sitting by the fire with my father and his friends, listening to them talk about the old days. Out of nowhere, we heard the drums. Not the kind we danced to during festivals, but slow, deep beats that seemed to come from the ground itself. My father's face changed, and everyone fell silent. "That's not possible," one of the elders whispered. The sound got closer. Then we heard her voice. It was strong, commanding, but it had an edge to it, like it came from somewhere far away, like from a grave. "Who dares to call me?" The voice echoed through the trees. I couldn't move. My father grabbed my arm and told me to get inside, but I was frozen. Then we saw her. She stepped out from the shadows of the forest, tall and fierce, wearing armor that looked old and battered. Her eyes glowed in the dark like burning coals, and her skin shimmered with the light of the moon. She looked like she had walked out of a forgotten past. "The Queen," someone whispered. Everyone around me bowed their heads, even the old men who had never feared anything in their lives. But I couldn't take my eyes off her. She looked human, but there was something wrong. Her face, it was as if it had been twisted by rage and sorrow, trapped between life and death. She walked past us without a word, heading straight for the village square. I heard people running inside their homes, doors slamming shut. The air was thick with fear. My father yanked me back inside, but I could still hear the Queen's footsteps outside, heavy like thunder. "Why is she here?" I whispered. My father shook his head, his face pale. "Someone must have disturbed her rest. They must have called her." Later that night, we heard a scream from the edge of the village. A young man, one of the hunters, had been found dead. His chest sliced open like he'd been struck by a blade. They said he had gone into the sacred forest the day before, the place where Obioma was buried. He had been warned not to, but he didn't listen. The elders gathered the next morning, performing rituals to send the Queen back, to beg for mercy. But I could still feel her presence, lingering in the air, watching us. It's been years since that night, but the drums still haunt me. I sometimes wake up hearing them in the distance, and I wonder if she's still out there, waiting for another fool to summon her. If you ever hear the story of Obioma, the Warrior Queen of Arochukwu, don't ask questions. Don't be curious, because once she is called, she doesn't stop until she gets what she came for. And by then, it's too late.